Welcome and thanks for joining us. So zero trust is a concept, and agencies large and small are going to need help as they overhaul their network security architectures and implement these new principles. The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency will play a crucial role in assisting agencies with guidance, training, tools, and services to help them on their zero trust journey. And so I'm very pleased to be joined today by John Sims, Senior Technical Advisor at CISA. John, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Justin. Glad to be here.
Yeah, and so as I just kind of teased out there, I'd love if you could talk a little bit more about CISA's role generally in terms of raising awareness, providing training, providing guidance to help agencies implement this big move to a zero trust architecture.
Sure. So CISA has partnered with OMB on zero trust in a number of ways, really starting post SolarWinds, on the heels of the Executive Order 14028. We saw the need to step in and provide some additional guidance to agencies along the lines of zero trust. That's really where the zero trust maturity model, as an idea came, into existence. And so as we continue to, support the executive order, we've had a number of close conversations and coordinations with OMB to, help formulate the strategy and execution of zero trust across the federal government, leading to M2209, the Federal Zero Trust Strategy. And so one of the ways we've been supporting agencies, not only in awareness, but also, with some level of training, is our organization has established a number of zero trust cyber stats where we perform webinars to look at zero trust concepts in the form of the doing deep dives into the individual pillars out of the zero trust maturity model to really get into a good conversation with agencies about some specific challenges that they're going to encounter or that they brought to our attention that are challenging for them as they're looking to plan and execute their journey on zero trust.
Got it. Yeah, it seems important. I'm sure agencies have a lot of questions in these webinars. What are some of the big questions and challenges that you see cutting across agencies so far?
Well, so far it's really been focused on identity. We're lucky to have the expertise of not only Eric Mill out of OMB, but also Grant Dasher, who recently joined CISA from Google. And both of those gentlemen are true zero trust experts in identity. So it's allowed us to really go beyond the multi-factor authentication with the PIV credentials, looking at how we can utilize FIDO and other mechanisms to really encourage strengthening the identity and access management capabilities to support zero trust longer term.
And so how can agencies learn more about these webinars? How often are they held? Is that kind of a key venue for you guys to spread the gospel of zero trust?
Yeah, so we hold them regularly, and we have a outreach team that manages the cyber stats to make sure the agencies are aware of it, what we're going to talk about. And I can tell you the last several zero trust cyber stats that we've had upwards of 700 participants on multiple. So we're catching a pretty wide audience here with these events. So I think it's been a good way for us to have a very focused conversations, give the agencies a chance to ask questions, and the questions that we can't answer within the 1 hour to 2 hour sessions, we do a follow-up, and we're also looking to generate frequently asked questions to support the longer term need.
Great. Well, another big way that CISA is driving the zero trust conversation forward is through the maturity model that kind of forms the basis of the OMB strategy. And that came out as a draft, I believe, last year. And I think you're looking at an update now. What can you tell us about the maturity model, the feedback that you've gotten on that so far?
Sure. So just to make sure everybody's on the same page, the zero trust maturity model that was developed by CISA, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, was really developed to support agencies out of Executive Order 14028 to develop their 60-day plans. We knew that agencies would be looking to CISA to figure out how they map the CDM program, for example, or some of the other programs that they take advantage of through CISA to zero trust. So a small team of us got together and put it together. We did release the draft out for public comment back in September. We received over 370 comments from a wide variety of partners in industry, federal agencies, research and academic organizations, as well as individuals and some international organizations. So we received more questions and comments out of the identity pillar than any of the others, obviously. And I think that's one of the cornerstones of zero trust. So it makes a lot of sense, and I think it gives us a lot to look forward to in terms of like how we're going to make adjustments to the maturity model in this next revision and identity, as well as the other pillars. We're expecting that the next version is going to come out towards the end of the year. It takes a little while for us to go through and adjudicate the comments. And quite frankly, we felt like there were other deliverables, such as the cloud security technical reference architecture, that really required more attention and focus, since it was a deliverable out of the executive order that we've been focusing on. So we have been working on the maturity model, but it's just taking a little bit longer than we anticipated. So.
Yeah, and I mean, it seems as if the draft version right now is enough to get agencies off to a head start and enough to kind of build these initial plans around. You mentioned identity again as one of those big areas that you might look to update, along with the other pillars, of course. But in terms of feedback on identity, what is industry saying? What are agencies saying about that pillar in particular?
Yeah, so one of the key things was making sure that the government's looking beyond the HSPD 12, the PIB badge, and making sure that we're leaning as forward as we can. So there was that element of it, but quite frankly, I think it gives us the opportunity also to make sure that this next version is more aligned with M2209, looking at how we're encouraging agencies to leverage multi-factor authentication that's phishing resistant. So there's a number of things we want to make sure that we capture in this next version, and that's why we're not jumping out of the gate trying to get it out as quickly as we can. We want to make sure that there's enough thought into how we revise it to make sure it's a longer lasting and enduring document.
Got it. And you mentioned it earlier, but the continuous diagnostics and mitigation program seems like a big service for agencies. Obviously, it is today and going forward under this march toward a zero trust security architecture. How is CISA looking to update CDM to account for some of the goals of the zero trust strategy?
Well, so we can look at a couple of areas, especially in the area of asset management. You'll probably recognize that in 2209 that there's a heavy emphasis on asset management, leveraging the CDM program, and agencies are encouraged to fully participate in the CDM program to ensure that they have a robust asset management capability. Also associated with that is the endpoint detection and response capability that CISA and CDM are pushing out to the agencies in the form of providing the solution or providing gap filling capabilities to ensure that they can get as close to 100% as they can within their environments. and making sure that the EDR solutions are providing valuable information to their Security Operations Center as well as CISA. Beyond that, there's a number of things that as we plan and look at future task orders that we're looking to incorporate Zero Trust more deliberately in those task orders, in those requests for service projects at the agencies.
Yeah, on the CDM front, I think one of the putouts from the strategy was that CISA would work toward developing the CDM program to better support cloud-oriented federal architecture. Obviously, agencies have made a big push to cloud services in various forms over the last several years. How is CISA kind of updating the program specifically to support things like automated asset discovery in a commercial cloud environment?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of work in a number of our programs, not only CDM, but the Trusted Internet Connections program, version 3.0 that I support and have supported for the past several years. And so when we look at cloud and what it means to do CDM in the cloud, there's a synergy between several of our programs to where we have to look, I think, beyond the program specifics and look at how we, collapse some of our program capabilities and requirements to make sure that, agencies can clearly understand what we're looking for. And so we've done a lot of work. We still have some work to do to make sure that there's more uniform alignment. But I think the cloud in particular is a good environment for us to fully utilize the CDM program characteristics and capabilities to support what we're trying to achieve with the Zero Trust strategy in particular.
In terms of other ways of mapping existing programs and guidance to Zero Trust, I think one thing you've been looking at is NIST Special Publication 853 and how inspectors generals are kind of going to evaluate agencies under FISMA. Is that something that you're still looking at potentially updating? What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so there's a lot of work. I think there's a lot of work to make sure that there's clarity in terms of when agencies start moving to Zero Trust and start breaking down the perimeter architecture they've relied on for so many years and start really looking at how they architect from the application and the data outward. I think there's going to be a need for us to continue to put a lot of effort into not only mapping data 853 and making sure there's clarity in terms of like how controls can be met in a Zero Trust context, but also certainly working with the IG community to make sure that they understand and are on board and can support what agencies are going to be doing in terms of transforming their security postures and even recasting some of their security controls. Because I think that some of the initial analysis that's been done by some of our folks, as well as some of the subject matter experts in the agency, is that there's a lot of effort that has to be put in, a lot of effort and thought that has to be put into how you articulate how controls can be met through Zero Trust and what it means to the overall risk management process and how it can serve to also reduce risk within the agency. Knowing that Zero Trust is not a one-size-fits-all. You've got to use a graduated scale based upon the nature of the information, data, and the application and its attack surface.
So it's as if, in addition to the architecture needing to be updated, the oversight of how that architecture is put together also needs to kind of be modernized a little bit as well, right?
Are you referring to the
specifically to the IGs and how they oversee progress through FISMA?
Yeah, I think so, and I think that one of the things that I think we need to do is continue to cultivate that relationship and what, again, how the architecture, the principles, and the capabilities can be utilized to support not only what we're trying to achieve with FISMA, but also zero trust.
Got it. And so how is CISA itself working, of course, with OMB, looking to measure progress across agencies on this zero trust strategy so far?
Well, that's a good question. And I think that we're in the very early stages of really seeing where agencies are. Yeah, we've got the structure of M2209 that's laid out by pillar. And I think that's going to be the basis for any measurements that are done. But I also think that, as we mature CDM, as the sensors and the capabilities are able to be expressed through the dashboard, I think that's going to be an important way to assess progress. But I think that we're still going to have to continue to rely on, the FISMA metrics as another example of how we can, measure progress in this area. If you look at how, just the FISMA measurements can occur, technically through the censoring systems, but also operationally through, questionnaires and other types of, metrics. I think that that's going to be, it's going to take a couple of different approaches to really get a clear picture of that.
And then once you do get that picture, what do you do with it at this stage? How do you take those metrics and do something about the gaps that you identify?
Well, I think that we're gonna. It's kind of a tough question to answer, because zero trust is not like something we're gonna have fully transitioned our environments into zero trust in the next 2 years. This is going to be a long-term endeavor that's going to require continuous re-examination of how we're meeting controls, how we're deploying capabilities to really protect the applications and the data as well as the users. And I think that as our understanding of what zero trust can do and how it can be used to secure our environments, we're going to evolve our thinking around the way that we measure what success really looks like. But I think the reduction in incidents, the reduction in intrusions is going to be a very important realistic metric for us to pay attention to. And what we're really hoping for is that we're going to increase the friction for the bad guy and make it more expensive to the point where it's like they're going to really have to focus their efforts, and that'll give us the ability to continue to tighten our environments up as the situation evolves over time.
Got it. I wanted to turn back to the move to the cloud. What other considerations do you think agencies need to make as they move their data and assets into cloud architectures? You mentioned the CDM program, but what about agency X? What do they have to think about?
Yeah, I think that agencies, in terms of like movement into cloud, they've got to probably pay attention to a couple of things. One is making sure that they have a clear understanding of the types of data they have and how they're going to protect it in those environments. What we've been promoting through the cloud security technical reference architecture, as well as the zero trust strategy and the maturity model, is that thought needs to be given to the data in terms of how it's being protected. And we're looking at making sure that there's more thought given to modernization of applications, so that we're not in a situation where we're trying to lift and shift into the cloud, but we're really re-architecting the applications and the data itself to make sure that it fits well within the cloud environments that it's going into. And if you look at what's been happening over the past several years, we're seeing that a lot of agencies have applications in the cloud that are also partially on-prem in their data centers, and then there's also cloud to cloud. So there's a heavy relationship between those environments, And we've got to have real clarity. And I think the agency decision makers need to have real clarity in terms of like what that looks like in terms of risk. Is it going to, add more risk? If so, what other, controls can be put in place to offset that risk? And I think that, making sure that there's a prioritization given to, like I mentioned before, zero trust is not a one size fits all, but, when you're putting high value assets, for example, in the cloud, that you prioritize the appropriate resources to make sure that those assets are protected to the appropriate level based on the risks that they're going to be exposed to in those environments. So I think those are the big things. And I think that, making sure that there's, encryption applied in transit and data at rest are going to be really key things that agencies have to really focus on when they put stuff in the cloud in particular.
Yeah, and that was a big call out under the cybersecurity executive order, of course, as well. How has that order kind of set a good baseline, starting last year for agencies to now go after their zero trust implementation plans that they've just put together this past spring?
Well, I think we need to look back to before the executive order, back to as we were looking at what happened with SolarWinds. I think that was probably one of the biggest wake up calls we've had in a long time, short of the breach at OPM. And I think that those types of incidents, especially going back to OPM, the SolarWinds, I think that when the administration came in, it was a prime opportunity for us to really hit the reset button on what we're thinking in terms of cybersecurity and what it means to the federal government and how we can use it to protect, what we need to in order to execute our missions. And so, looking at, the amount of time and attention and focus that's been put on cybersecurity, cloud modernization, logging and visibility, as well as zero trust, I think has been probably one of the more remarkable strategic approaches I've seen since I've been in government, and that's over 25 years. So I think that where we're headed is very good. We've got to continue to build on it. And I think that the administration is focused on doing that. And CISA as a partner in this is squarely focused on it.
As someone who's kind of steeped in the technical side of things, how do you kind of drive this conversation forward within your community, within the federal government, when it comes to raising awareness, putting together training, and driving the conversation forward on the technical side of zero trust?
Well, I think that we do it through a number of different venues. I mentioned cyberstats earlier in the conversation, but we are constantly talking to departments and agencies, within the cybersecurity division at CISA, as well as, with OMB, on a regular basis. And in every conversation we're having, it's about zero trust. It's about improving cybersecurity. It's about modernization, and modernization in the cloud in particular. And so I think that what we're finding is that, we've got a number of different, opportunities to talk to agencies. We also talk to the vendor communities about, how they can better support the federal agencies in their movement to cloud and zero trust. So we're using every lever we possibly can in terms of pulling the levers and conversations and all of our implementation guidance to make sure that we're staying focused on achieving, the near term and long term goals and objectives for zero trust.
What are some of the big asks that you have of the vendor community, industry in particular, when it comes to this conversation?
Well, I think looking at some of the discussions we've had with the vendor community, I can tell you that when we're able to push across our focused set of requirements, whether it's for visibility, We find that a lot of the vendors and the cloud service providers are very willing to, have that conversation with us, look at what we're asking for, and meet us, where we need those capabilities. Because I think generally what they're finding and what we're finding is what's good for us in the federal space, and what we're asking for is something that can be used to support their commercial clients. So I found that they're very willing to talk to us, and we're increasing our engagement with industry, to make sure that we're advancing cybersecurity given the situation that's going on in Ukraine, looking at ransomware and all the other things that we deal with from a cyber threat position. So I think it's something that's going to continue. I think it's a very positive direction in terms of where industry is meeting us for our needs, and look forward to continuing those conversations with industry.
One thing we haven't talked too expansively about is just the aspect of network visibility and attack surface when it comes to the zero trust principles. How is this helping agencies kind of drive that concept forward of not just being aware of your network and the assets that are there, but also looking at it like perhaps an attacker would look at it, and then you can kind of do risk management from that standpoint?
Yeah, a lot of what we've been doing with visibility is really centered on the minor attack framework, and so that's a pretty big shift in terms of when we look at visibility requirements and how we can use information coming out of the agencies, whether it's through CDM or through our cloud log aggregation warehouse that's being piloted to support the National Cybersecurity Protection System. I think that we're seeing that there's a good opportunity for us to continue to use minor attack to really put some of these, put the visibility into the context of what is actually happening on the threat side of the discussion. And so, we've been working with our threat hunting team in cybersecurity division to really kind of reshape what we've done with visibility. And you might have seen that we've had the EVRF guidebook come out in draft for public comment. So that's something that we're using to try and reshape what we're doing with visibility to support agencies in the cloud and on-prem.
And John, I also wanted to ask about, trusted internet connections. I know a program that's been near and dear to your heart. Can you talk a little bit about TIC, where that's at, and how it's moving forward under this new zero trust push?
Sure. So if we look back at TIC 3.0 and where it came from, which is out of M1926, it really gave us the ability to transform how we were using the trusted internet connections architecture, which was very much perimeter focused from the 2007 timeframe up through 2019. And we've been able to revise the concepts, the reference architecture, the capabilities, and broaden it out so that it's not so much a perimeter focused approach to architecture, but rather more boundary focused that's flexible enough to use to support zero trust, but also greater use of the cloud, because that was one of the biggest complaints that we had with the legacy TIC program, is that the architecture was restrictive in terms of how agencies could use the cloud. So that was one of the biggest shifts that we made with TIC 3.0. I think it also really laid the groundwork for where we've been going with zero trust. There are a lot of very good concepts that we've built into TIC 3.0 that are very supportive of where we're heading with zero trust.
Got it. And then, I want to just ask, are there any other types of training that's out there to help IT personnel and other groups better understand and meet the goals of the zero trust strategy? We've talked about some of it, but is there anything else that you think you should highlight?
Well, so the training, for zero trust is there's not really much out there right now. There's at least one vendor out there that's offering zero trust training, and it is very good. I've taken it, and I think that what we're looking for is more vendors to step up. I'd like to see an offering where we have multiple levels of training in zero trust, where it supports the executive level, the management level, the IT level, and the user level. And while they have different needs in terms of what they need to know about zero trust, I think that zero trust marketing, from the marketing perspective, has kind of a negative connotation to it, because a lot of end users will say, "Oh, you don't trust me." Well, it's not that. It's just that there's a reason why the zero trust concept is really permeating what we're doing with cybersecurity, because we know that users co-opted through phishing attacks and through other social engineering attacks, and they need to understand what it means to have access to applications versus having broad access to the network. And I think that that's one area where training can solve that dilemma. But I also think that when we're looking at where IT teams are architecting, provisioning, and supporting operations in enterprise networks, they need to really understand the principles of zero trust and what it means to protect those systems, data, and users that they're supporting.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the end users, because I think that's obviously a really important facet to this conversation. Don't tell my IT team, but I still haven't done the cybersecurity training that I've supposed to have done in the last couple of months, but I'll get to that soon. But how can you explain to end users, why this is important, how it maybe benefits them, and of course the organization, and as you alluded to, why it won't hamper them and make it harder to do their jobs?
Yeah, so quite honestly, I mean, I would probably go about talking to them, from the perspective of, making sure that they have an understanding of what's actually going on with cybersecurity. I think a lot of people are much more aware of some of the general threats. Everyone hears about ransomware in the news. Some organizations have felt the pain of what it's like to go through a cyber incident. I think generally speaking, most users, when they log into the network, which is what we've been doing for the past 25, 30 years, there's that sense of, well, I can get in and go and do my work, and they have access to everything. And to be honest with you, I think it's making sure that they understand why having access to everything is not good from a cybersecurity perspective. And I think you can tie that back to some of the phishing campaigns, and some of the exercises that we've been doing in the government. I'm sure that other organizations have been doing it for years, where we do phishing training, and you see how many people click on the malicious link. And so when they understand that when they click on that link and it's a real malicious email, that the implication is that that's now a vector into the network and into the applications, and they can move laterally within the environment to continue to establish a foothold. And I think that when people understand it from some of those perspectives, I think that they'll think differently about what having access to the network or the enterprise network really means.
Got it. And then, what about for senior executives? Many of them will be watching a lot of our audience is senior executives in government and in industry. What would you like to see in terms of training and awareness at their level on zero trust?
Well, I think that the importance, if we look at what zero trust means to an organization, it's about prioritization, it's about resourcing, and it's about making sure that the priorities and the resourcing match what's most important to the organization. And so I could tie that back to the high value asset systems and programs that agencies have. And just going back to my earlier comment about OPM, we don't want to see another OPM happen. We want to make sure that leadership from the very top, all the way down to the person that's doing the administration, is fully cognizant of the risks associated with protecting the data and making sure that there's an awareness at every level of what it means. And I think it's a cultural thing that that we need to continue to evolve, that it takes everybody to support this. Leadership is a huge part of that, because they set the direction of the organization, they set the priorities and the strategies. And so I think when we get leadership involved, a lot of the other pieces will fall in line, to include the proper resourcing, the training, the other things that go along with that.
Are you seeing more engagement from other agencies on CISA's offerings? We talked a lot about some of those, CDM programming and others, since last year's Cyber EO and since the Zero Trust strategy came out?
Yeah, so we have had a renewed interest in CDM. We also have the protective DNS that we're rolling out here in the next couple of months. We've been working with a lot of agencies on positioning them to take advantage of that. We also have had the vulnerability disclosure program, which is also part of M2209, that we've seen a pretty significant increase in interest in that as well. So I think that the answer is yes, because what we're trying to do is, through the strategies and through the implementation guidance, continue to make sure that there's a renewed awareness of what we do have to offer to help agencies protect themselves.
And you mentioned identity being a big question mark for agencies earlier. Are there others that you'd highlight in terms of what agencies are asking you about and where they need help?
So there is a lot of interest in microsegmentation of networks and what that really means. So I think that that's one area. Data is another, and I think that just following up on that, there's also a lot of interest in complex cloud environments in terms of like application workloads, in terms of containers, immutable configurations, and those types of things. So, but I think that the network segmentation and microsegmentation are some key challenges, because a lot of the applications themselves have been designed to work on relatively flat networks, and so when you put those in a segmented environment, you start increasing the filtering of the traffic going in and out of those applications. It increases the amount of operational attention that those applications need in terms of making sure they can communicate properly in those more restrictive environments.
So does that mean it affects the performance of the application, or how do agencies have to look at that?
No, I don't think it's not necessarily a matter of affecting the performance, but rather making sure that there's an awareness of how the applications communicate and how they need to communicate in a segmented environment.
Got it. And then obviously identity and attaching privileged access principles to identity to people is so important. But what about applications? What about non-people assets that are on the network that need to communicate as well? Are you seeing progress there?
I think one of the things that we could look at is the requirement for DNS over HTTPS and also DNS over TLS. Those are two things that we're looking at in terms of requirements in M2209 to protect the DNS infrastructure inside of agencies, but also going back to the asset inventory, making sure that agencies are aware of what's on their networks and what's communicating with their applications, and when there's an anomaly, being able to manage that.
And then looking ahead, I'm wondering if there's anything in particular that you're looking forward to in terms of engagements with agencies or industry going forward on this zero trust path.
I think that right now we're in the process of meeting with each of the agencies on their implementation plans, and we're certainly learning a lot by having those discussions with them about some of the features of their plans. And I think that what I'm looking forward to is over time, looking in the next 6 to 9 to 12 months. Re-engaging with some of those agencies to see where they're at in terms of what they originally planned, what kind of progress they have made, and what they're thinking at that point in time after they've been working on this for a while. Because I think that their thinking is going to evolve a little bit, and I'm hoping that they can advance as quickly as we need them to. But I'm really looking forward to seeing what kind of evolution takes place at the agency level.
I'm sure you wish you could be in multiple places at once, but so many agencies, so many different varying issues across agencies. How do you keep up that regular cadence of kind of meeting with agencies, ensuring that progress moves forward without overburdening yourself, splitting yourself in two?
Yeah, it's taken a lot of time, but we've got a really solid team between the CISA participants, the OMB federal CIO participants, as well as the National Cyber Director has been, personnel have been involved. So we've got a really good pool of SMEs that we're leaning on, working across, not just the federal CIO element of OMB, but also the budget side, to make sure that we've got continuity between what the agencies are saying, what they're resourced for. So to me, it's a very good and transparent conversation. But yeah, it's a lot of work, but we've got a really strong team that's involved in this.
All right. Well, we look forward to the next update. But John, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been really valuable.
Thank you very much. I was glad to be here. Thanks.
All right. Again, I'd like to thank today's guest, John Sims. He's Senior Technical Advisor at CISA. I'm your moderator, Justin Doubleday, and you're listening to Federal News Network. Now let me send you back to the studio for more on the Zero Trust Cyber Exchange.